Good evening and welcome. Locking Horns. This is Split. We're back 2023. It's a new year. It's a new day. My brother Drew is here, and we're going to talk a little bit about him tonight. Or rather, he's probably just going to tell us about himself.
That's
Drew.
It's a goal.
It's a goal. So, we'll just jump right into it. Give us a little bit about yourself, where you come from, and kind of how you came to walk the Norse Heathen path.
Well, I'm from Catawba. It's northwest Roanoke County, which is, but as far as sub area from here. Uh, it kind of, it's a very Christian area, very Baptist, Methodist kind of background. I grew up in that. And then, of course, my mother's Catholic. She was from Craig. Uh, and that stuck with me till I was in my 20s, really.
Okay.
It was one of those things where I was almost afraid to believe something different. And it kind of came about. I started actually, honestly, with atheism, just rejecting, because I felt like Christianity was just so wrong and so incorrect for me that it had to be wrong and there couldn't be anything. So, starting from that, probably almost a decade of that, I started wondering, my family's European. What did they believe before Christianity came to Europe? Because it's all from the Middle East. I started looking into it, and I checked out Wicca for a little while, looked into that. It wasn't interesting. It seemed too new agey, and like they were, I guess, like edgelords, kind of in a way. It's like I dated a girl that was really into that at one point, and it would just, I knew right then and there. I was like,
this is not for me.
No, this is a little too weird because they try to mix too many things together. I saw Druidism when I was in the Air Force. They actually had a Druid chaplain, and they had Druid services. They did it on Sunday because that was the historic. Yeah, that was just the historic day. But I remember I would go to the Catholic services when I was in the Air Force, but just to get the fuck out of the barracks, mainly. But
go to church or stay here.
Yeah, go to church or do work and do miserable shit because it's boot camp. So I was like, yeah, I'll go to church. And one day I decided, I was like, I'm going to check out this Druid chapel stuff. And I went in there, and that week particularly, they were focusing on Northern European gods, Teutonic and Scandinavian, which is really one and the same in a lot of ways. There's a
grand scheme of things,
little differences.
Yeah.
But went into that, and it stuck with me. After I got out of the Air Force, dated the crazy chick that was into Wicca. Moved out on my own, was still pretty much atheist at that point. And then one day it just kind of clicked with me. Like I found it through music, really. And it fit. It felt right.
So music.
Mm-hmm.
So I've sat down with brothers, friends of ours, and inspirations coming from early fiction, or early literature and film.
Mm-hmm.
And then others that are inspired or drawn to it through reading.
Rock, like in the 80s and stuff like that, you would hear bands talking about Thor's hammer, and it was like a steady theme. And initially I was into, I wouldn't say hair metal, but like the more like Iron Maiden-y, Slayer-ish kind of stuff. Yeah. And there's underpinned themes in that. But more to the point is later on throughout listening to music, I've met other people. I got into heavier and heavier stuff. You find bands like Amon Amarth. You find bands like Tyr. Vader had some stuff too. I mean, if you wanted to list all the heathen bands, we could sit here all night.
Okay.
But
all right.
But in either case.
So you discovered.
Yeah.
Stories of the lore through music.
Absolutely.
And then from there, did you take on like self-study?
From that I looked into it, and I remember specifically it was probably 2013 or 2014. I remembered some guys locally here, which we all know, and I was like, there's something to this, and it seems right. And I would read on it what I could find. The thing is if you wanted to study Greek mythology, there's a billion books on it.
Right.
If you want to study Egypt and their mythology, there's a billion books on it. If you want to study just about any other major culture in the world and their religion, there's books on it. With heathenry, they're selective because they're kept as poetries. They're kept as stories, and they specifically label them as stories, not as mythology, not as like a canon.
We have Snurley Sturluson.
Yeah, and he was a Christian.
But
So he says.
Well,
So he
well,
says.
well, the thing with Snorri was he was of Icelandic upbringing. He was an incredibly educated man. He was a very, very schooled person.
Yeah.
He was the law speaker at the Althing.
Yeah.
You know, so his Christian influences need to be taken as merely just a piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
But he is our
Well,
source of many things from that era.
At his time, too, you have to consider he could have been as heathen as anyone else.
Exactly.
But if you were caught being a heathen, there's a lot of things that they would do to you. I mean, think about what they did to Copernicus.
It's as high as treason.
Yeah, they burned you at the stake. They would crucify you. They would do anything. So who knows? To be honest, the only person that knows now is him. And guess what?
He's gone.
We can't exactly ask him. But yeah, no. As the music aspect goes, that's something that always moves people. That's something that reaches into you. You don't have to see it. You can imagine it. It's telling you a story, along with your favorite instruments.
Right.
And portrayals. So yeah, all the stories from my personal favorite band, Hamon and Marth, was really the ones that really pushed me into it. They were very in depth with telling stories of not just like mythos and adventures of the gods and
stories from home.
Well, stories from home. They would tell you stories about. They would build a character. They would. Runes to My Memory, for instance, is a really good song. It's a slow kind of. It flows. It's a very good riff. It's very constant all the way through the song. It talks about.
I would prefer Warriors of the North.
Well, that's fine, but it talks about guys going. This is where they went east rather than west.
Mm-hmm.
They're on a riverbank. They get attacked. He gets stabbed in the back. He's dying. He's laying on the beach. He can feel the sand under him. He can feel the blood leaving his body, and all he wants. He's got his sword in his hand. He's dying with a weapon in his hand. He says all he wants is just build a runestone to his memory. That has nothing to do with any of the lore of the gods or anything.
It's just a story.
It's a person. And you know what? It's very likely in that time period that someone felt exactly like that. Yeah. Something like that happened. They may have even taken it from a story that they had heard from the locals or something.
Right.
So, but yeah, that all spoke to me really deeply, and understanding that, ancestor worship in a way. It felt right because, I come from a family that we know about 150 years of our history since we've been here.
Right.
But I know the great deeds that my grandfather and his grandfather did, and my grandmother and her mother, and I know what the family's done. And that to me is more important than anything somebody could have possibly happened to them in the Middle East 2,000 years ago or more.
Right.
That sounds a whole lot like other stories from before. It just felt more authentic. It felt more realistic. It felt it felt more heartfelt, like it was realer. Is realer a word?
Realer is
now a word.
Is probably a word associated with fishing.
Yeah, more realistic. It felt like I said, authentic. It was there.
Yeah. So aside from the music, how do you involve yourself in, the heathen community around you?
Well, I stay in Catawba a lot, so I'm not
super... For those of you that don't know, Catawba from here is about a 45-minute drive, and it's over the river, through the woods, and about 3 mountains up and down.
Yeah, and you go right past Grandma's house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of my interaction is with a lot of the people that have been here before.
Yeah.
Yourself.
Yeah.
And then a few others, and some are part of like our local group, some aren't.
The story of you and me starts with this thing that we used to do called Metal Mondays.
Oh yeah,
And when that, in combination with
that was one of the biggest authenticators actually for me, was Metal Monday.
Metal Mondays.
Because when I approached the older fellow that comes here and speaks to you, can I say it out loud?
Senor Jefe?
Yeah, Senor Jefe. When I approached him, he was doing I don't know if everybody knows or not, but he was an entomologist with the guy with bugs.
Yeah, he was insect guy.
Yeah. Well, I actually reached out to somebody on Facebook. I was like, hey, you know how to get in touch with this group of people? And they're like, this is the guy you want to talk to. And they pointed me right at him, like they threw the dart, hit him in the face.
Right.
And they're like, and he's at Happy's Flea Market doing an exhibit on Yule and on bugs. And I was like, neat. That's two neat, interesting things to put together. But it was Yule was coming the week after, and he has a bug collection.
Yeah.
So I walked out there, didn't know what to expect. Go right in. He's right there near the front. I walk up to him and I'm like, hey, would you like to go to this little bar down here? We're doing this thing called Metal Monday, and I think that you would be interested in it. And I'd known him for 5 minutes. We went down, we got a beer at this bar, we talked about it. Suddenly, I had a shield. I had to paint and get prepared. And we were going to hang them on the wall, and that was going to be our haul. And for like 9 months, it was. And it was one of those things where you did not miss.
No,
if you missed it, you were
not
in the in crowd.
And
it was painful because it was on a Monday.
Yes, yes. This is when we all go back to work and we're like, God, we hate Mondays. Well, we need to make something more awesome for Mondays.
It was fun, for sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Until
we had about 6 months of 3 a.m. Mondays.
Yeah,
or I should say 3 a.m. Tuesdays.
I called it Liver Tuesday.
It was bad.
Because
it was great.
It was a lot of water going into the liver on Tuesday.
So we'll get back to the Metal Mondays thing. And so that was, now that we've looked into it, circa 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you and I met for the first time. And I guess it was 2 weeks, maybe not even a month after we met. I said, yes, you can move in. I have a spare room. You need a place to stay.
Well, it wasn't so much a yes as it was I was sitting there. I was living with some other friends. And at the time, I wasn't jiving. Like, I would pay rent, and the person I would pay rent to would keep the money, and then the other half of the party that owned the home would never see it. So it got to the point where they're like, thought I was freeloading kind of thing, or one of them did, the other one didn't. Anyway, it was some deception. You came up to me and were like, hey man, I know you're needing a spot, and I need a roommate. And I was over on Martins Creek.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a boon at the time.
I loved that place.
Yeah, that was some good times. The bachelor pad.
The recovery spot.
Oh yeah.
That was a different time in my life. But that was such a good time in my life though, because we lived together for about 2 years, and we had the Metal Mondays thing, and we were doing events with Vikings of the Valley, and we were just staying involved with the community, and it was a well-balanced agreement between us. And
minimum responsibility, maximum amounts of fun.
Yeah.
We were at a spot in life where we understood how to handle our cash. We just didn't want to handle it properly.
Right.
But we knew how to handle it proper enough to have a home over our heads and gas in the tank.
The bills were paid.
Yep.
And there was beer money. And there was firewood.
There was beer money, mead money, liquor money. No cheese money, though. I had to steal that.
God save the queen.
Yes, God save to the royal baby.
Just now a teenager.
To the royal teenager. His cheese was delicious. That'd be a good story to go into. But no, you're talking about the other ways too, other than music, is how you kind of live that life. Like I said, man, most of the interactions with community members that I have are the same ones that we've both shared for years. Every once in a while, I meet a new one. And most of the ones I find now are like upper middle class white dudes
Older?
with no, roughly the same age, maybe up to 10 years older. So up to 48, almost 50. They usually drive big trucks for some reason, and I've met a few police officers in Rome City that wear a Mueller.
Hmm.
But most of the time, I generally self practition just because of apparently Catawba is so much further away than anything else apparently on the planet. It's right next to the Pluto.
But where you live
Yeah,
in that part of the country,
it's wide
in
open.
that part of the culture of that area,
Yeah,
it's respectable. I grew up in a similar kind of
yeah.
area.
I'm 10 minutes from everything,
Hmm.
but I feel like I'm hours away from trouble or anything.
Because there's a mountain in the way.
Yeah, there's never, rarely, only if when one of the older folks up there gets hurt do you ever hear a siren.
Hmm.
Um, it's no street lights. There's a few stop signs.
Your
but no
house is
stop
hard to
lights.
find.
It is. It's awesome. It's great. I love it. In the summertime, it's even worse because you can't even see it. There's just like this dirt goat path that kind of leads to it. That's one of my favorite things actually about the house I'm living in now. It's on a cliff.
Where I live is I'm the only house, well, one of
This
the few
far back.
houses that's on the back side of the property.
Yeah.
Everything else is up on the street, and I was like, no, I live
Yeah,
on the
on-
back of the property at the top of the hill, looking down on everything.
I told Beck I couldn't remember exactly where to turn, but I was like, I know it's somewhere in here, and I was like, what's the name of the road? And I'm not going to say it, but I had to think of the name of the road. I was like, there's the road. We kept going. She's like, it's somewhere here. I was like, it's telephone pole, mailbox, long driveway, not up close. And then I turned onto it. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is it. And I was like, yep. My brain's good. Okay, cool. Because every time I leave out of here, I'm usually pretty fucking shit housed. So, but no, the way I typically would say I practice, put my nose to the grindstone of the faith is like I do a lot of hunting, a lot of stuff outdoors, and when you're out there and it's just you in either the forest or a field, stream, whatever it is, you really see how far your people have come in general, like all the human race in general. But you realize like it's literally it's you and nature subtly kind of wants you dead. Um, so you kind of realize that like it's a battle against elements, and you see how you think about how your ancestors, and especially think about Europe. If you go back as short as 5,000 years, how much colder it was and how much nastier it was, and you can kind of see where you know their understanding of the elements and things became divinity. So as you're out there alone, you smell the smells, you see the sunlight, you feel the wind in your face, or the cold, or the snow, or rain, or whatever. You really understand what it's all about. And if you look at just about any deity form, you understand it's a man versus nature, and trying to understand their surroundings and trying to understand those forces. And I prefer Uller myself, as you know.
I was going to ask you if Uller was.
He's god of winter, skiing, and hunting, mostly archery. But I'm okay at archery. I prefer modern firearms, but just like winter survival, understanding how the cold affects you, your surroundings, everything else. When it rains, it's like tomorrow, it's supposed to be pretty nasty, icy, rainy. So wood gets wet, and then it freezes. Well, when it freezes, technically, the wood is dry. You can start a fire with frozen wood, and it slowly drips out the ends. Well, you think our ancestors knew that? Gosh, I hope so. We probably wouldn't be here.
I would imagine that there was a social standing of person that sole job was to make sure the fires don't go out.
It's what we had slaves for back then.
like I said, someone of
Yeah.
social standing, and their job was
Oh, we weren't going for that word.
right. Well, a cast of person.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing like ritualistic.
That is tasty.
It's good when you mix it, man.
Yeah.
It's not good by itself.
No.
When you boil it down like ritualistically and things like that. I have a place. You've been to the spot behind my home. I made a hunt camp. We call it Ulerheim. It's like Uler's home. I go there. I've got fire pits and things like that there, camp spots.
I have spent a couple of nights on that
on the rock.
On the rock.
It's
a beautiful thing that you've.
The ritualistic part of it, like with the hunting, for instance, specifically with deer, because it'd be really funny with rabbits or squirrels. But I've read, and I don't know if it's rooted in history or not, but it seems to work for me. The night before a hunt, I'll leave out a horn such as this or a full size with ale or mead or something as an offering to Uller for, kind of like a good luck charm kind of deal. After the fact, if I've killed something, I take the liver and the heart and I'll have a fire and I'll burn it. But you burn it and that's an offering.
Yeah, it's absolutely an offering.
It tends to work, to my experience.
John tells me that he will give offerings to the land and then till those offerings into the land before he plants.
Absolutely.
And
we do the same with our gardening, and if you take something from the land, you have to give something back. You can only take so much until the land has nothing left to give you, or it will give you nothing but scrub.
Right. And then you have to fight forever to give the land back what it needs to produce.
That even goes with something as simple as a hay field. When you're cutting hay, it's just either orchard grass or long grass, whatever. You cut it so many times, you're taking all that nutrient away that's pulled from the soil. While you can keep your cattle alive with it, eventually
there's not going to be anything in it. Well, so let's get back to your connection with Uller. How did that come about? Was that kind of a natural thing to fall into because of how you grew up and where you live and the way that you live your life out in the middle of nowhere?
I'd say not really.
No?
No.
Tell me. Tell them. Tell us all.
No. So when I started out with this, it's like anything else. You kind of have to be there, put your dues in before it really speaks to you. But before you understand what it's trying to tell you, where you're trying to come from and what fits for you. I thought for the longest time it was going to be Odin, because as we've seen, I collect random tiny little bits of knowledge, and I'm used to losing a whole lot of pieces of myself and or time or money to gain bits of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then for a long time I thought it might be Thor. I'm a big guy.
For the longest time that I've known you, for as long as I've known you, you have always been adamant about acquiring knowledge.
You have to. I feel like if you're not learning something, then you're probably dead. And, that I learned from my father for sure. But as Christian as he is, he always had a thirst for it. He still, to this day, still wants to learn. And I remember going to sleep up there. Mom and Dad divorced when I was like 6-7 years old. We would spend the weekends at Dad's, and I remember we'd watch Married with Children because Al Bundy. I remember going to sleep up here. We after Married with Children went off, we would watch random documentaries on Discovery, History Channel, whatever. And I watched Dad. At first, it didn't really interest me, but I watched Dad watch it, and he's like, I could see him learning and see him like enjoying the experience of like learning. So even if it was something he knew something about, he learned something new about it, and he loved it. So that's where I got that from. I refer to him as eclectic.
Yeah, absolutely. And though being, and this is just my opinion of the man in the time that I've known him through you, is he's very heathen in the way that he lives his life, but
He's very dedicated.
he's a very Christian man also.
Well, I look at him and like my grandmother that recently passed, the same. Very heavily Christian. That's the way they grew up. That's how they felt. They maybe they didn't have another option. Maybe they didn't see another option, but they're comfortable with it, and that's where they came from. And if anyone is deserving of heaven and their depiction of the afterlife, their enjoyment thereof,
It's them.
it's them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if that's what comforts them,
Absolutely.
May it be-
That,
may
that,
it be so.
and that's, I come from a very Christian household as well. And if that's what eases your mind,
may it be so.
if that's your faith,
Yeah.
if that's your faith and that's what brings you peace, then so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Who am I to say otherwise, except that that's not the way that I think.
I found within the Christian community here too, like I said before, I went through a lot of the atheism woes, I guess you call it. There's nothing wrong with an atheist. Typically, they're good people. Most of them are quiet, reserved, and good people. Most Christians in this area that I've noticed, anyway, that I've spoken to on the subject, they'll want to, well, you go to church, you'll want to bring it up or whatever. And I'm like, no, I don't believe in Jesus. It's not my thing. They're like, are you an atheist? I'm like, no. And I'll explain to them, give them a brief synopsis of what's going on. And they're okay with it.
Yeah.
I had one tell me recently, this is a friend of mine, a good friend of mine that I work with. And he's like, well, he says, your God can't be that bad. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, you're a good man. So if you're this good, your God must be pretty damn good too. I was like, well,
That's acceptable.
That's like one of those things where you're like, back in the day, you people wouldn't even trade with me. So, we're moving forward.
This is progress.
It took 1,000 years, but hey, we're working on it. We're going. We were talking about Christians and how they're becoming more accepting as long as you're not atheists, which is not very fair.
So the hardest convince that I've ever had to deal with is still to this day my mother.
See, that's where you and I differ. My mom, she's Catholic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Love my mom.
Yeah,
we have a good we have a good relationship. Man, I forgot where I was going with that. No, mom, she knows.
Yeah,
she doesn't care. She really does. She's the if that makes you happy kind of person. She'll love you no matter what. My dad, on the other hand, if I were to break that news to him, I'd probably be out of the will and everything else. Like it would be devastating to him.
Right.
So with him,
so we have actually the opposite because.
Yeah, your dad's different, but the mothers are similar. Well, no, your mother and my father would be similar.
Yeah. So my dad's completely cool with it because he's always been.
Yeah, your mother's worried for your eternal soul.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
well, we're a little bit more flagrant with what we do with our souls. When they tell you you're going to hell, and you're just like, yes, well, so are you. See you there. It's not.
I don't know where I'm going, but I'm living.
Yeah.
And
I'm here for now too.
For me, the conversation with my mom and pretty much the line, if you want to call it a line that I've stuck with, is you happen to believe a certain set of stories. I happen to believe a different set of stories. And that's all it is. When it comes down to it, regardless of what you believe, you have to understand, an educated person would understand, that religion and all these beliefs are a man-made construct to begin with.
If you want to break it down really simple, there are over 5,000 deities currently.
Recordable.
No, currently.
Yeah.
Right now. Being worshipped by humanity. And all you Christians out there, you got the right one. Promise. We're sure of it. If Zeus came down from Mount Olympus tomorrow and was obviously Zeus in every way, shape, and form, that would make everybody stop and say, wait. We might have
misthought.
Yeah.
We were given the wrong interpretation of God.
Yeah. The thing, there's your key word, interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Interpretation is everything, because if you'll notice from different region to different region, there are reasons that these things came about. And the one thing that I loved about heathenry, even old heathenry, they left their lands. They were in a new place. They accepted that the gods of this place were different from the gods from their home. They never had an issue whatsoever accepting the fact that Christians worshipped a carpenter that nailed himself to a tree.
Sounds vaguely familiar to Odin and
Mm-hmm.
placing himself on the tree.
Well, that god didn't particularly put himself to a tree, but basically he's on a tree. But they didn't have an issue accepting that they were different, that they believed something different. There was never any quarrel specifically from the Norse against anyone else's religion. They wanted to trade.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted your valuables, your
Mm-hmm.
goods. And if you would not trade with them, now that's where you come into conflict. Because once you start strangling off the goods,
if you don't want to trade with us, we'll just take it from you.
You should have just traded.
You should have just traded with us.
It was so easy. Now think about how many different versions of the gods that we see as gods. You have the Teutonic, Dinar, Thor, Woden, Othin,
Yeah.
etc. They understood that they were the same, roughly. It didn't really become a problem until Christianity. Christianity created a whole huge host of issues in Europe. And I'm not saying that Christians are bad people,
No.
but the spread of their religion did not come in peace.
One of my big turnaways. I have two really big turnaways from the Christian faith, and that was one. There were just absolutely way too many different versions of the same story.
You mean like literally the entirety of the New Testament?
Like how many kings versions do we need to have? How many different versions of the Bible? Like there's hundreds of different versions of the Bible.
Can you want me to play? You want me to play?
And there's just way too many inconsistencies.
Can I play Loki's advocate on this?
No,
one?
no. You could definitely.
So
play Loki.
they were accounts.
Yes.
Supposedly accounts. So
the number two reason why I really turned away from the Christian faith was basically their history of convert or kill, and it's all forgiven.
Yeah. No. You're absolved from sin for killing non-believers, which sounds a whole lot like jihadis, but at the same time.
For me, I just simply find no honor in that.
This is funny, but it kind of illustrates your point. So, in Europe, right at the time of the Crusades, they were too busy for science because they were worried about God. And in the Middle East, they were too busy to worry about God because they were working on science. Like, you understand that numbers, or Arabic numbers, the numbers that you know, like 2, it's numbers of angles, etc. The word algorithm, alcohol, all those things, you know, these names for chemicals and everything else came from Arabic scholars. Well, now, in modern day, the Middle East is way too busy worried about God, and Europe is way too busy worried about science. It's flipped. Entirely, 100% flipped. And you're right. The considerations of a heavily religious person from an Abrahamic religion are so vastly underserved. If you think about their God and what their God is and what they're trying to achieve with it, and as you look at the vast scale of the universe, you understand that their God is so small. He's not big enough to understand. This is why they burnt, and I've mentioned this name once before, Copernicus. This is why they could not withstand scrutiny from the scientific community. The difference in heathenry is not only do we welcome discovery, because that's what have they done? They discovered Iceland, Greenland, North America. They were looking.
Vinland.
They went to look. They were curious. They desired to know more. Mm-hmm. And yes, they took their gods with them. And their gods never were so small as to where some little thing, such as, this is vaster than we thought. Well, our gods must be greater than we thought. And they would retool and rethink and change the methodology of their own teachings. If you think about Gununga Gap and how the heat and the cold
and the ice
and mixing together, think about a story as vast as the Big Bang, right?
Yeah.
A manifestation of heat in a single point exploding. Think about the void of space and its coldness, the sun and its warmth, and water and every other biochemical that is necessary for life coming together to create life. You could really, honestly, dumb it down to a story, yes, please, much like the creationist myth. Now, do I think when we go outside and pick up a rock that it was a giant's bones? Probably not, because the bone's a little bit different over here than it is at my place. I live on a sandstone ridge. You live on a limestone ridge. It's obviously different. But it is the innards of a giant sphere of rock, which is our planet. It's completely 100% relatable. Mm-hmm. And it's not like some Noah's Ark living with dinosaurs bullshit.
I think one thing that's definitely a straight up and solid takeaway is that heathen folk connect with the natural forces of the earth and sky and the existence that we live in.
I'm going to say something that's unpopular with a lot of people.
Okay.
The gods as you know them, in my opinion, is how I see them, how I feel, how I understand them, are personifications, human personifications of forces of nature. Now, what I'm saying there is, for instance, Thor, he's got a strength. He's a god of war, protection, thunder. I would never expect to physically see Thor as a humanoid.
No.
I expect to feel him and understand him.
Connect with his essence.
Yes, as a spiritual force. It's a name
that I associate
with this.
Right. So someone asked me some years ago, how do you connect with your gods? I was like, I tell you what. You go stand outside as the thunderstorm's rolling through, and you tell me if your blood doesn't start to boil. Tell me if
the hair doesn't stick up on the back of your neck.
Your heart doesn't start to pump a bit faster.
Especially in a
Tell me that your adrenaline doesn't start to roll into your blood. There is a connection that we have with earthen forces.
We're from here.
That make, maybe not that make us, but attune us with.
And that's
the earth itself and the natural cycles of what we live in.
To go back to Uller, for instance, one of the greatest things I have ever felt in my life was the rush of a good kill, a clean kill, knowing that it's going to support me and my family. I'm going to eat it, and it even gets to decorate my home in some circumstances.
Yeah.
There's nothing better. Nothing in the world. That rush is worth billions of dollars. at a minimum. And it's one of those things where when you identify with it, when you feel it in your blood,
It's priceless.
yes. And people really want to put a label on their faith. For instance, um, a lot would call me an Ulerman, and they may call you a Tierson or a Tierman or whatever. And while that is the one that you connect with, that you feel deep down inside that you can connect with, the truth of the matter is that all of them collectively, all of them, all aspects of this universe, all aspects of virtue and disvirtue in this universe do connect with you. You have a connection to them because the same spark that is your consciousness is part of that collective consciousness. You're part of it all. You just may lean one more way than the other way. And that's what, I mean, the heathenry in a whole. If someone comes to me and tells me that they're the Thorsman strictly, I'm like, well, you're looking at this as a monotheistic kind of way.
Sit down, let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk about this, because maybe, just maybe, you don't understand the others enough.
So
I have a shrine specifically to Uller. I do. But I have a likeness of Odin hanging in my home. I have a Thor's hammer around my neck. I have offerings to Freyr and Frey in the spring and even in the winter, because snow is good too. It's just frozen rain.
Right. Still water.
Yeah, I have it all. I want to honor them all, not just one over the other. Now, while you may have a particular draw to one because you feel more like this may be yours, they're all within you. All of their touch, all of it's within you.
One concept that I tend to grasp onto, probably stronger than any other, is the fact that I like to think that I can, understand or maybe theorize about what is the essence of our gods in our daily lives. What is the essence that holds us, that we connect to? So for me, Tyr is just that sense of right and wrong, that sense of absolute justice. But I also carry with me Thor's hammer, protection of my family, protection of my home.
Okay, so back then, you had Thor comic book that had been out for a long time.
Yeah.
You had Marvel's Thor movie, and then you had a few little things, nothing much, but basically the History's Viking show took off and people went nuts with it.
People went nuts with it.
And
I'm not going to lie. The reason that I wear this haircut originally was to wear the haircut of Ragnar Lothbrok. Yeah.
Yeah, they probably didn't wear their hair like that. Just saying.
So it
was actually probably pretty in comparison to modern times. If you think about medieval haircuts, like the page cut and stuff, dudes used to cut their bangs, man, and that's terrible. If you got I mean, back then probably not so terrible, but okay, so you had very little, and then Vikings came out, and that became insanely popular, which, for good reason, is cool. And it has a lot of, I'll tell you, the timeline and their characters, they don't line up at all.
Not with the historical record.
But, what you see in the show, the backdrops, the props and stuff like that, extremely realistic. Very, very, very cool.
And their aspect and take on the home life.
Yeah, they had some interesting takes on the religion too, and the religious aspect of it. Very unique, and honestly, there's probably some things in it that probably did happen, and there's a lot of things in it that probably didn't happen. But the thing with the religious aspect of it is we don't know. Nobody knows. Like, you could go over to Norway, Sweden right now. The closest you can get to that kind of lifestyle, the people that practice it there, and they're not going to know a lot of it. There are a few religious practices that were recorded. Quite a few, well,
Right.
many, but they did their interpretation, and it's Hollywood as shit, and it looks good. It's wonderful. But in any case, like the scenes where he was dreaming before he died, and he saw the gate of Valhalla, and he was running for it, trying to get to it. I thought that was cool, personally.
Yeah.
Now, like, do I think that's what it's like? Probably not. But it's not a costume to wear. It's not the thing of the month.
Yeah.
It's not a flavor of ice cream at Baskin Robbins. It's not something that comes and goes. People that are truly interested and serious with it and are have decided to be heathen will always have been in an extent and always will be to an extent. Hollywood has an effect, obviously.
Yeah, that's part of the American culture.
Absolutely. And look, man, if you're one of those people that came to this through a TV show, if that's what showed you, I mean, there's televangelists too, man.
Right. If the Vikings series is what opened the door for you for a different idea of understanding, then absolutely so be it.
I came to it through music, as we spoke earlier, and that's just kind of what spoke to me, and it hasn't really moved in my head back and forth. What's important? What's not important? Should I be? Should I not be?
Yeah.
It was just a thing that was like, whoa, this is me.
It's more to the point of, and it may be shitty to say it this way, but an identifying.
It's okay for people to think that that's them, get into it, and understand that that's not.
Right.
That's part of becoming. That's part of you becoming who you're supposed to be.
This has been said to me.
So if it's part of your process, man, we welcome you while you're here. And if it's not your end game, that's fine too. But
if we are not the right people for you, that's okay.
Yeah,
but we welcome you while
I
here.
love how I absolutely fucking adore how Hollywood makes it. It's either one of two things. It's either like this amazing, beautiful existence with the earth and nature, or it's this terrifying, droning background music. We're probably going to cut your throat and burn you on a fire to some ancient eldritch god. Terrifying experience. There's only two ways about it. There's no middle ground. Look, man. And Jesus got the corner market on.
Yeah, but we got the blood. We got the blood eagle, man.
Yeah, no, fuck around, find out. Yeah,
crucifixion. Come on.
That's the ultimate. Please. That's the ultimate fuck around and find out.
So, but for someone in the modern day and age, we live in the 2000s. Okay, we live in the 2000s.
Brad, it's 2023.
I know it's 2023, but we live in the 2000s, not the 800s.
Yeah.
Not the 900s.
What's the difference?
Time. Yeah, but at that time, the blood eagle was like the epitome.
I guarantee you
of a hanging. Of a beheading in the gallows.
That was a torturous kill, and I guarantee you there are things equally as terrifying. The Mexican cartel is pretty good at it.
Yeah. What's that? The Colombian necktie?
Oh, that's pretty nasty.
That's a nasty one.
There's more, but the thing is
capital punishment.
Yeah, capital punishment. Honestly, there's. Man, we could really give some pointers to the justice system. And
so heathenry, as we understand, is simply just a word to describe a thing.
Yeah, it means people of the hearth. It's a country folk, the folk that were backwater. It's actually a Christian term.
It is a Christian term. It was used to describe the country folk.
Yeah, it was used as an insult, really. Mm-hmm. And they embraced it because they were the furthest out, the furthest to be reached, and they still practiced
Their ways.
their ways, the ways of their ancestors, and they considered them backwater, uneducated shits.
And that's okay. We are not the city
Yeah.
folk.
No, I'm not city folk.
No,
Absolutely
definitely not.
And that's another reason it works for me too. And honestly, as you see Christianity is crumbling and right in front of you, especially in America anyway. Do you remember the hike we took
You have brothers like this.
when we went with Jeff? Oh, excuse me, El Jefe.
El Jefe, yes, that's correct. El
Um,
Jefe.
When we went with El Jefe for the hike, remember there's snow on the ground a little bit,
Yeah.
and we went from the north side of Dragon's Tooth. We went out down the little peninsula hill that kind of kicks out over the pond, and then we lost each other. For real. Anyway,
So what's the direction that you would like to see, that you may like to influence on the heathen community, the American heathen community moving forward? Like, what would you like to see happen? What do you think the next step should be, hypothetically?
I just want particularly gatekeeping to stop. Now, I've even honestly today exhibited some symptoms of gatekeeping. There are no more real or less real or true or untrue heathen than anyone else. There's people getting into it, and there's people that will get into it and leave it. The thing is, it needs to be open. And there's not a definitive answer. And, as wonderful as Snorri Sturluson was, and the Icelandic sagas, the Eddas are, it's not clear. And that's the problem with all of it, is we're not clear. There's not a Bible to us. There's not a clear manifestation of it in a modern sense.
So I think that's probably kind of one of the intriguing aspects about heathenry as a whole is in this reconstructionist phase that
we have
that it's going through, is simply the fact that it's so open to interpretation. And let's be honest, we don't live in Norway. It's not our home culture. It's not our home belief system.
Even the Norwegians don't know, and the reason they don't know is because the destruction of everything pre-Christian was damn near absolute. It was close. There are stories. There are rituals. There are things that were written and left behind, but it was in a quick, furious mess. And I don't care who you are, how holy you think you are within this system of belief, there is not a guideline. There is not a perfect answer to any of these questions. And the thing is, the beautiful thing about heathenry, and the beautiful thing that that's always been beautiful about it, is even the stories that you get from old. No one clan did one thing.
Yeah.
It's open. It's allowed. And, you're going to find elements of Christianity and Islam. The people that left Buddhism and stuff too, the people that have left those faiths, that have come to this faith, you're going to find elements of it. And that's okay. It's been over 1,000 years of oppression from the Abrahamic faiths and the Asiatic faiths and stuff like that. You're going to find elements of that. And honestly, they may even cross faiths.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
The Romans have a pure example. They were well documented rituals. They were well documented examples of things that they did at certain times of the year, how they prayed, how they sacrificed, and everything else. But for us, we have some examples, a few. We have funeral rites, we have bloat, we have certain things that we can look at and say we did these things, but the full aspect of the religion we don't have.
Yeah, we don't. We don't.
And that was robbed from us. And this is for us to rediscover.
Yeah, I totally agree with you when you say it's for us to rediscover. But when you go down the path of trying to rediscover something or bring back something from a distant past,
how do you do it?
How do you do it? Right.
There's no right answer.
Exactly. There is no right answer. You just have to do what feels right in the constructs of what we
I would
know.
even put it as feels right. I would put it as when you walk with your gods, when you are there with them, the things that you do and the things that you attempt to do to honor them, you will know. We all know. And as I said earlier, when I burn a liver and a heart for Uller, it produces good hunts for me, good weather, and you call it luck maybe. It works. It feels right. It's I feel that it's correct, and that's a small act, a very small act, and it's something easy to do.
Yeah, and
it brings that part of existence closer to you. It's intuitive. This faith is intuitive. It's all 100% intuitive. So if you are a farmer, a hunter, a craftsman, a warrior, and we have all of those within our faith, and other faiths do too, the way the gods will interact with you and produce results for you are different than the way that you produce results in other religions, but they will be defined by the class that you find yourself in. And I've been in the warrior class before, much like El Jefe and what's the Torskeg.
Torskeg.
Much like them, I've been in those classes too. And those, we didn't feel it then. We didn't know it then, probably.
But you recognize it now.
But we recognize it now, absolutely, 100%. And we want those new converts, because we're all converts, except for perhaps our children. We're converts. We want them to understand these gods were the gods of your grandfathers so far back that the word great doesn't even calculate. We want you to understand that every aspect of the world that you live in, despite technology and despite what you're told by the modern world, is understandable through this faith. And even technology, to an extent, is understandable through this faith. And it's basest of forms.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll let the rest of them think for themselves until we decide to put up something else. Brother, I appreciate you coming here and speaking with me tonight. I appreciate, the life's experiences that we have shared with each other. And I pray that we share much more experiences in the future.
Absolutely.
Be sure to give us a like and subscribe. Until then, until now.
Hit that bell.
Hail the gods. Skål.
Skål.
That's good mead.
It's the best.